So, Penn State lost Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. What's next, though, and what are the bright spots that we can take away from this Penn State team? Well, first of all, I think you have to look at what Nick Singleton, Katron Allen have done. They looked incredible when they came in as true freshmen. They kind of bounced around. Nick had 1,000 yards that year. Katron didn't. Last year, Katron had 900 yards, and Nick didn't. This year, they both have around that 600-700 mark. Now they both had over 100 yards today. That puts them probably both around that 700-800 mark themselves. So I would say overall, Nick and Katron looked incredible. Penn State has a lot of upside to look with them. But the other thing is you have a deep running back room coming in, or already here, with Corey Smith and Quentin Martin. And Penn State has to take that into consideration. And we don't know what Nick and Katron have set for their careers. But overall, they look really good. And for Penn State, still looking to make a deep run here in the playoffs, that's a bright side because the running game was a little bit inconsistent as the season went on. But now, Penn State fans should be excited because that's a big bright spot for them as well. The other hand, wide receivers were inconsistent throughout the season, but tonight they stepped up big when they needed to. Mari Evans had a touchdown, Trey Wallace had a touchdown, and those are guys that have kind of been hit or miss. Trey Wallace obviously missing last week's game, but Penn State has some upside there in their wide receivers as they look head forward. I'm not saying their wide receiver room is perfect. It's not. That's one of their biggest weaknesses on the team. But what I'm saying is it's not completely shattered, and they have a chance to improve that and bright side for that to come. Because Tyler Warren can't always take the receiving load of this team. And now Penn State fans have something to look forward to a little bit, at least, if you want to say, Trey Wallace and Mari Evans, they can make big plays in big games. And that's something Penn State fans, you guys need to be excited about and look forward to and trust them a little bit more than what you have. Obviously, there's not a lot of depth besides those two, if you want to say, because Liam Clifford didn't have a great game today. Julian Fleming didn't have any catches either. But Penn State can make room in that department and hopefully continue to build on this loss and flush it and get better. They came back after losing to Ohio State and had a win. They need to do the same thing after this loss to Oregon as they prepare for the playoffs of that first round that's almost guaranteed to be a home playoff game at Beaver Stadium in what's probably going to be a pretty chilly game in the middle of December. And even today, A.J. Harris was saying that could be an advantage for Penn State because the other teams may not be used to that cold climate, depending on where they're from. And there are a lot of teams that are from warmer places throughout the country. Another important thing, the bright side of Penn State, is A.J. Harris. A.J. Harris, believe it or not, is only a sophomore. He never redshirted. He did play last year as a true freshman, but not a whole lot. A.J. Harris is the most reliable defensive player on Penn State. Obviously, Abdul Carter, but I'm not talking about the defensive line. Secondary linebackers. A.J. Harris is an elite player, and he's got a lot of time left. Like I said, he's only a sophomore. He can be the key to lock up a guy like Tez Johnson. Now, Penn State didn't do that. They didn't put him in man. But A.J. Harris is elite in the sense that he can lock up guys. Anytime he was in the general vicinity on the field, Dylan Gabriel did not throw the ball there. A.J. Harris is very good. He's quick. He has great coverage. He has good hands. He can pick off the ball if need be. A.J. Harris is the real deal, and Penn State fans need to get excited about him and what he brings to this Penn State team. And he can be a difference maker come the playoffs. And he's a guy that Penn State needs to utilize, especially with the absence of a guy like KJ Winston, who's not going to be back. So Penn State needs to look at A.J. Harris because Cam Miller, Zion Tracy, Jalen Kimber, they're not going to make necessarily the biggest plays that Penn State needs. Consistently, at least. Obviously, you got Jalen Reed, Zachy Wheatley. But A.J. Harris, he is elite. And he's a guy that Penn State fans need to be ready for to come the playoffs. A.J. Harris is very good. You watch him play today, very good coverage, big plays. He had a huge tackle. A.J. Harris is a guy to watch. Another thing to watch is Keziah Izzard had a very big game today in a Penn State defensive line room that's struggling a bit. Obviously, Alonzo Ford is out for the season, or long-term injury, which there's not many games left, so he's out for the season. On the other side, Hakeem Beamon left the team a few months ago, about a month and a half ago. So really that room is only down to Devon J. Thomas, Keziah Izzard, and Zane Durant. Obviously, Devon and J. Thomas and Zane Durant have been very good for Penn State. Zane Durant's having an incredible season. But a guy like Keziah Izzard, who has to step up big time, did that today. And who's to say he can't continue to do that in the future, come the playoffs and in his career overall. Also, Penn State offensive line, bright spot. With the absence of Anthony Donk, who's out with a long-term injury, Nolan Rucci filled in only his second starting game of the season. And he did a good job today. Overall, the Penn State offensive line did a good job. Oregon has a very good defense and very good defensive line, and this offensive line did a pretty good job for Penn State, giving Drew Aller time to make those big throws like he did to Trey Wallace and so on. And as well as the offensive line created good gaps, good blocking for Nick Singleton, Katron Allen to run. Even that play with Bo Prabula that was called at the 1 yard line. The offensive line looked good, and it's something Penn State fans need to pay attention to. Sure, they've had games where they struggled. Now they've had this game where against a top defense where they did very well. Sure, you're going to get sacked a couple times. You're going to have a couple TFLs. What you do in response to that is what makes the team great. And this Penn State offensive line did that, and they responded well. They played well. They played hard. They played physical. And Penn State didn't have a lot in their favor tonight, but that was another big bright side of this Penn State team. Another thing, if you want to look at defensively, Dom DeLuca also had a very good game for Penn State. He had a pass deflection. He had at least one big TFL that I can remember off the top of my head. And overall, he was a pretty big difference maker, and he was actually the first guy they brought out post-game for interviews. And Dom DeLuca was like, it stings to lose. And he's right. And Penn State can look to him, too. He's been kind of inconsistent for Penn State. He's not looked as a top linebacker in Penn State. But Penn State doesn't have a deep linebacker room either. You got Kobe King, Tony Rojas, Dom DeLuca. Those are your three. And then after that, it's Tamir Robinson, Tyler Elsdon, Keon Wiley's still out. Hopefully we'll be back at some point, but like I said, he's still listed as out with it coming back from injury. He's been in practice, but he's out with an injury. Was out for an injury. With an injury. And Penn State needs guys like Dom DeLuca to step up, and he stepped up today, and Penn State can continue to look to him, hopefully. Another big bright side for Penn State, Ryan Barker. I know Ryan Barker missed a field goal. Penn State would have lost either way because it was an 8-point loss. Ryan Barker's been very good for Penn State. That's only his second missed field goal of the season. He's been consistent for Penn State, and field goals can become very important in big games like today. Against Oregon, it could have been a difference maker. Come playoff time, it could be a difference maker. Clemson today won off a field goal at the very end of the game. Field goals are very important, and Ryan Barker has been very good for Penn State, very efficient, has hit some long ones, he's hit some short ones, he's been consistent. He hasn't missed an extra point. Ryan Barker is another big bright side of this Penn State team. Then if you look overall, the Penn State offense put up 37 points on a top defense against Oregon. So overall, they were good. Now, obviously Drew Aller had 2 touchdowns. One was a very errant throw. The other one was a great play by the defense, but nonetheless, he made threw 2 interceptions. And you can't really do that in big games. He needs to adjust from that. It wasn't his best game, but it wasn't his worst. He still played well. He officiated the offense. Drew Aller is a great game manager. And like I said, Penn State put up 37 points to the number 1 team in the nation who has not lost and has one of the best defenses in the country. Penn State's offense was not the problem today. And all season long, the Penn State offense has bailed out the defense. You look at last year's team, the defense carried the offense when Drew Aller and company were still trying to figure out what worked for them. This Penn State defense has given up 45 points to an Oregon team who's undefeated. It's super difficult to win big games if you give up that many points in a single game, especially a championship game, because you know the other team is very good. So the way Penn State needs to bounce back from this is finding ways to get the defense to be more consistent. And all season long, they made good adjustments at halftime. Today, they were outplayed. You have a guy named Tez Johnson and Dylan Gabriel on the other team who are both studs and top players in the nation. And Penn State didn't really have an answer for them, and they need to figure that out. But on the offensive, or the bright side of that, is the offense has been very good for Penn State. And most games you can win when you put up 37 points. It didn't work out today for Penn State here in Indianapolis, but hopefully Penn State can bounce back from this and can win a decent college playoff game, make some noise, win at home, maybe win on a neutral site. Penn State season's still very much ahead of them, and you can't count them out yet. They may not be an elite team, but this Penn State team is still pretty good. I would even say they're great. Sure, they didn't beat Ohio State. They didn't beat Oregon. Both those teams are elite teams. Penn State's not quite elite yet. They're still a few pieces away, but it can still be fun to watch them finish out the season. Who's to say they don't make a miracle run and make it to the national championship game and give it their all? Penn State's still a very good football team, and it's fun to watch them compete and play and get better every game. So get excited, because Penn State's still going to the college football playoffs.